I'm Julia from Family, and we're here at Nursery World 2023. I'm joined by Rob Fox with Active Childhood UK, and he's agreed to sit and talk with us for a bit and answer some questions. So Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Firstly, could you tell us a bit about Active Childhood?
So Active Childhood was born as a research platform whilst I was studying at university.
Okay.
To connect like-minded professionals within the industry and to share and air best practice.
I love that.
Which has grown really. It has grown from a platform of me and a couple of hundred friends to educators globally and airing and sharing practice on an international perspective.
So if a early years manager or an educator was to come to Active Childhood UK, what kind of knowledge or support could they expect?
Anything, any support, any guidance, any level of support, any level of guidance in relation to child development. And it's aimed at the practitioner, it's aimed at parents, it's aimed at all sorts to bring about a shared understanding of child development, what child development is, debunking the myth of school readiness and getting children prepared for the next step of learning, and actually debunking it to nurturing the whole child for who they are and recognising that they have intelligences that are unique to them.
You touched a bit on school readiness there, which has been a big topic of conversation recently, especially with reports coming out recently that a lot of reception teachers or year one teachers are saying that children aren't school ready. Where are we kind of going wrong there?
We're not nurturing play. We're putting more focus on getting children to the next stage of their development and actually not recognising them for who they are, but also we are pressured with making sure that the baseline assessments are in place, the observations are in place, crossing the dots and crossing the I's and crossing the T's. Making sure we've got a lot of conformity in our sector still, that we don't take time to focus on the children's interactions. We don't put down the tablets or the phones or the Fire tablet or whatever it may be, and just be in that moment. I always say observe more, do less. And actually, that was said by a great pioneer, Magda Gerber. And actually, with that, it's understanding the process of the children playing and letting their play be unique to them without it being moulded to an adult expectation.
When we fail to do that, or when we plan too much based on our views or our expectations as adults, what's the risk? What could we miss?
You miss the little interactions, you miss the little moments in play, you miss the experiences that can evolve through play in the moment. On a practice level, during the pandemic, I became a nanny for 2 young children, and we used to go out when the parks were shut and go to the local cemetery. And I remember one day meeting someone, and they were looking at me because the children were all dressed up in their all-in-ones, and the 6-month-old baby was crawling on the floor, looking at a piece of ice and feeling it, and moving it around and experimenting. And I was just standing back and watching. And this lady said to me, "Rob, are you going to stop that baby in the moment, because he might get it in his mouth?" And yes, I understand the risks and challenges that may have. But through that, he was so joyful in the moment. He was laughing, he was babbling. The 4-year-old, 3.5-year-old was starting to become interested in phonics, and he was struggling to the pronunciation of a few letters. What I haven't said here is he had he's trilingual, and English is his third language, and he was looking at the headstones and he was learning the letter sounds by looking at the headstones. It reminded me as a practitioner that learning happens in those invisible moments. Learning evolves from opportunities that we may not see, and actually by nurturing that process, pausing, taking a step back and realising that actually he's dictating the curriculum. He's dictating the curriculum and the opportunities from play that aren't brought together with a worksheet or a flashcard that is flown in his face.
I think that's a really interesting point, that the lady questioned, well, won't you stop him? And I wonder if that speaks a little bit to the lack of knowledge around how children learn that way. Do you think maybe that person didn't necessarily see the learning the way that you had?
I believe it's a discourse and a very Victorian style element of the way curriculum is, in conformity, and understanding that we have all had an individual journey to get to where we're at, but actually recognising that as an early years knowledge and research that's out there, that it's ever expanding, and it's not just one approach that fits all the boxes. It's a mixture of life experiences. Your story is different to my story. We can empathise with each other, but we will never understand, because I've never walked a day in your shoes, likewise with mine. So it's about having those professional discussions, breaking down that professional discourse with our colleagues, society in that moment, and actually realising that it's okay to challenge perspective and air decisions based on what is right for that child in that moment, and allowing it to be just being present for children, seeing and being with children as they evolve, their ideas evolve in practice and in the moment with the child. And I see it so many different times where, especially nannies in the park, I nannied during the pandemic. Off the back of that, people would go to tie their shoelaces without letting them have an attempt to do it for themselves, because they want to hurry up the process. If we take a step back and nurture the process for what it is, and not conform to an end product that is out of the reach of that child, or that child may reach that stage when they're ready to do so, not when us as adults have a conformist opinion on they need to be ready now. I see this with 2-year-olds, potty training. You know, this term before 2, I remember working in a daycare nursery, and his parents said to me, "Rob, he's not potty trained. All my friends' children are potty trained." Where is our knowledge? And we need to empower one another to actually say, have you tried this? Have you supported this? Have you that? But do not rush the process. We're gifted as early educators to be able to give children a window of time to be empowered and to reach their potential. If we rush our children, there is going to be more informed trauma in years to come, because they haven't been nurtured to reach where they're at in the moment. These opinions for me stem from, I've been in Iceland with the lovely Tom Shea, one of my key mentors in this industry, and looking at children's experiences in nature, talking about giving them the choice, allowing them risk and challenge, giving them the opportunity to, going to talk about a nanny day here, splashing puddles. There was a chance with the same child when he got to becoming confident on his feet, age 14 months, 15 months. And one day he had his wetsuit on, these all-in-ones, grabbed a stick and submerged himself into a puddle. But he was stirring the puddle and he was laughing, and the joy of early childhood is that moment, the laughter, the embracing element that actually he was just allowed to be who he was in that moment. And it made my day as an educator feel so much joy that I could embrace the joy with even the most routine-based things that occurred. Cooking the dinner that day, I had a smile on my face because I was able to reflect and look at where we are. We need to empower reflection in our teaching and learning styles always. And that is often hard when we're up against the conformity. But you need to use your voice within the sector to say, I know my child, I know my time. Let's embrace childhood for what it is in that present moment.
You said something so interesting there about regarding these timelines we set for children. So we, as a sector or as an education sector at least, have an idea that children should be able to do certain things by the time they start school, and that's a decision we make. And the risk there is that we limit their curriculum to the point of focusing only on those things that we think create school readiness. But when we do that, how does that affect neurodivergent children?
It brings about too many labels. And I've been quite open. I've shared my story with you before we came on as a neurodivergent individual, and I went through my own schooling of many labels thrown in different directions, and for the neurodiverse child, it's coping with the day-to-day things, the hour-by-hour interactions, the social exclusion that as an adult I now speak up against for these children, having experienced it myself. It's also recognising and looking beyond the tokenistic element of, we have a child with SEN needs. What does that mean? Each individual layer of SEN is, and especially with the neurodiverse spectrum being so wide, providing the tools in your toolkit to support the children in regulating their emotions, giving them time to explore emotions and not rushing to the next step. And I think, especially in our sector, we need to reframe the policies that we have around behaviour management. Let's not manage their behaviour, because actually it's about developing an understanding that we need to understand and empower self-regulation. More work is being done within our sector to promote this, but we also have the other end of it where settings are using behaviour management style policies to dictate the way their children should be in line with expectation of policy. So how can we break down that myth?
I think it's a really interesting point, and it's certainly something I've witnessed myself when I was working in settings, 10 years or so ago. We had a behaviour management policy, and then it became a positive behaviour policy. And then now we're seeing more around the vocabulary of self-regulation, co-regulation. Do you think we've come far enough? Where could we improve?
It's interesting. It's developing an understanding of empowering one another to talk and share best practice, to the ideas of reflection. How are we dealing with these situations in our day? How has Susan done it different to Jane? Or Michelle may have a different way to dealing dealing with the situation that may occur. And it's never shaming. And over the years, I've seen shaming happen in settings where a child is bitten and practitioners will go, that's naughty behaviour. Actually, if we in that moment take the time back and look at our environment around that child, what was the situation? How could we have supported that child better? Are we failing that child's needs if this has escalated to that point? Which is the frustrations that they may face.
I think it's a really key point as well, that we as educators actually have the opportunity to share with parents too.
Oh, completely.
Because not every parent might have that in their toolbox to understand why certain behaviours that we might perceive as negative are actually happening. If your child is having a meltdown in the middle of Tesco's, as a parent, that can be triggering, it can be frustrating, it can be stressful, and that can lead to a near meltdown as a parent, because you get angry, frustrated. Why is this child not doing what I think they should?
Why is this happening?
Exactly. And as educators, we have the opportunity potentially to support parents to actually understand why that might be. Maybe the lights are overstimulating, maybe it's the noise. We can help parents with that. And
actually, interesting, it reminded me of something that occurred when restrictions were lifted and we were all allowed to go back out again. And the 3.5-year-old, we'd been out all day coming back from our various ventures around the city, and we got over a bridge and he just stopped and he was running off, and I said, please stop. And then I found myself becoming frustrated because he wasn't listening to what I said. So he immediately became dysregulated, and I said to him, take your time. We sat together on a bridge. There were cars going by, there were people coming by to and from busy area, and lots of people were staring at me and going, what are you doing? And I just said, I'm giving him space to calm down, wherever you may be. He was feeling dysregulated because he couldn't understand why I'd said stop, and it was because I couldn't see him over the other side of the bridge. But I allowed that child the time and space in that moment to be experiencing his emotions, feeling his emotions. And in the end, he said to me, I was feeling a bit sad. And the answer evolved naturally rather than me going, how does that make Rob feel? Which often can bring about our own conformist standard on their expectation.
I think something else that's really worth thinking about is, you mentioned there that, he initially hadn't listened and that made you feel frustrated, and reflecting on our own triggers as educators can be really worthwhile as well, especially because this is a stressful time for the sector. We're in the middle of a staffing crisis, there's a cost of living crisis, and all of those things that make us human outside of our work, we naturally bring to work in ourselves anyway. So how important do you think it is that we're also aware of our own self-regulation?
I think it's important to have a hobby outside of the sector as well. I think we're all so dedicated to our work and time that, a level of therapy for me is my photography. I go out and do street photography. I've started picking up a book that's not early years related. It could even be just watching a Netflix documentary on something completely random. We as educators need to take care of ourselves. I occasionally have a self-care day where I go and have a massage or get my feet done, get my nails done. Looking after the basics, because without oil in your tank, you can't give to others as much as we do, to recognise that actually that we have so much to give, and so much to give, and so much to see, and so much opportunity. If we can empower self-care within ourselves, we can be a better version of ourselves for the young children that we look after.
I think that's a really key point. And I think also it's important for leaders to recognise that as well, that keep an eye on their team and their staff and make sure they're looking after themselves too. And it doesn't have to be as lovely as a massage is. It can just be, like you say, reading a book that isn't about early years, just taking some time to go for a walk, something that doesn't have to cost anything, but just gives you that mental kind of breath of fresh air, I suppose.
Yeah, or develop writing skills, or, develop the empowering reflection with your writing. And in terms of just being still, going for a walk. I have a dog. I take a family dog. I take the dog for a walk, and make sure it's at the end of the day, and encompass taking the dog for a walk with looking at the sunset in the evening. My parents live by the beach, so I'm fortunate that I can come out of city life when I'm in Cambridge and go to the Essex coast to thing, but also allow time for family and friends. Empower family and friends at your heart of your community and involve them in your work and your practice. If you're in a smaller setting, make sure that you utilise the community. Bigger settings, you tend to struggle with bringing people on board. But really looking at your children and how you can look after and support their needs and meet them where they're at when they're ready to do so. I always say, reflecting back on your points, play is important. Play is not defined by us, but defined by them. If we played a little bit more, then we would bring about the skills for early education moving forward to a sense that sees children who embrace curiosity, awe and wonder in that present moment.
I love that. And I think you're right. I'd love to play more.
Play more.
I think as a final question for you, you've spoken a lot about conformity. I'd love to kind of delve into that a little bit more. What risks are we running when we focus too much on ensuring children conform to a certain timeline or a certain behaviour? What could we do better?
Interesting question. I think if we look at more of a understanding of child development and teaching child development to our parents from day one, of no parent is given a book, and the understanding is if you are given a book, it's got development milestones of where my child needs to be. If you could empower them by saying the research laid down by Howard Gardner, if you could develop an understanding between new parents that your child has a level of multiple intelligences, they will develop when they're ready. Empowering Reggio impact, giving back to the 100 languages of children, where children are seen to be capable and competent in their own ideas and theories. So their theories are greater than our own because they come up with new discoveries in that present. They are risk takers, they are engineers, they're our future. Understanding the process instead of the end product. And that even comes down to what we're doing in the classroom with children on a day-to-day basis. Observing, seeing, interacting, interfering. Have those level of questions in your head to realise that you've got this window of time to really empower them. Give them the self-confidence. Give them the toolkit of understanding that they are a superhuman. They're a superhero. Let them fly with their potential. And instead, like going back on previous point, to be given a label. If you give children labels and don't embrace the level of individual intelligences, you're putting risk of lack of understanding.
I think it's so true, and I think the more we can also, as educators, share that with parents, because I think my son is autistic, so as a parent myself, I feel those pressures. As much as I know about early education and child development, I still feel those pressures. Shouldn't my child have done this by this point? Or so those intrinsic anxieties that parents have. As educators, we're in such a privileged position to support parents. And like you say, children have multiple different ways of being intelligent. Maybe a child doesn't walk by this age or talk by this age, but what are they doing? Where can we celebrate that child's development?
Where can we celebrate? And actually, a case study I want to share with you. I've been very fortunate to work with a child recent months who is non-verbal, and seeing how society reacts to a child with, he is non-verbal, he's 6 years old, and he doesn't use sign language. He has no ways, he hasn't found his way yet of communicating. But I give him time. And in that moment, that looks like me taking him to a coffee shop. People may touch, and they do. People may look at me and go, why have you got such a big child in a stroller or a pushchair? People will question that. But what I see in him, I give him the same opportunity in the park to go and explore. I'm there for him in that moment. And he'll go and grab a stick and he'll shake it up in the air. Or if he's feeling upset, I will let him have it out and regulate for himself. And people will look at me. But why am I worried about people looking at me? Because when I meet him in that moment, I see the pure magic that early childhood can bring. We have a connection that is so much stronger than words. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional here. It's so much stronger than any language. And people are saying, he's got to find a way of communicating. I'm saying, no. It will evolve with time. It will evolve with his opportunities. And it's down to us. And there are children out there that need us to be their guiding light moving forward.
I think that's a really beautiful moment to end on, and thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for answering my questions as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.